Thank you, all of our career thought leaders, for joining us. We're excited to be here today with Barbara Bissonnette. Barbara, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so this is where career services providers go for the now, the new, and the next. And you are in tune with that now, the new, and the next, as specifically as it relates to individuals on the autism spectrum. We're going to take it just a little bit wider than that for a minute and talk about some trends that we're seeing in the popular news and in the popular employment space around individuals who are neurodiverse. I know I've read some articles about employers having more accommodations in the interview process, as well as once people are employed, and just wanted to see what you're seeing. Is this happening with businesses, and how is that impacting your clients and the clients of the other coaches you're working with?
Well, yeah, I do think there certainly is, and particularly in the larger companies, the whole topic of DEI is really getting a lot of attention in the human resources department and among the managers. And I think also companies are investing more in training managers, whether in general, right, about diversity and inclusion, or even more specifically, such as, uh, diversity and inclusion for people on the spectrum, but providing more education, right, for not just the HR people, but also managers. On how do we make the workplace more inviting? How do we help employees to be successful and even change the way that we're evaluating candidates?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk going on, and I've heard in the interview space that they're thinking about how the interview process may or may not be welcoming to people who are neurodiverse. So it's exciting, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad to hear that you're hearing it is happening, and we're not just reading about it in the news.
Oh, no. No, it is happening for
Well, that's
sure.
great. Excellent. So one of the questions that we had someone ask about your class is why you use the term Asperger's, when I know the mental health community has somewhat moved away from that term to go towards the autism spectrum. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I think there are a couple of things in my so officially in the diagnostic criteria in the United States, Asperger's was eliminated as a distinct diagnosis in 2013, right? And it became rolled into this very broad autism spectrum disorder. Now, what I have found is that Asperger's does continue to be used as a descriptor. So we understand on this huge continuum who really are we speaking about, right? Because we can have individuals with Cantor's or classic autism, right, who may be nonverbal, need 24/7 care. And then we kind of come up this very broad spectrum, whereas not everyone, but some folks on this Asperger's end, may be married, have families, right? Individuals who are in market wage jobs. So that's one factor. And then the other thing is, I find that a good portion of my clients identify themselves very strongly as being Asperger's, Aspergian, Aspie, right? And really have
Hmm.
feel very strongly and sometimes have concern that when employers hear autism, that everyone automatically thinks Rain Man, right, from the movie. So that
Yeah,
is why
so
I think
there's
it's
the difference between the official diagnoses and the common language, and in the population itself especially, it sounds like that term is still something that they use to talk about themselves.
right. Not everyone, but certainly, like I
Right.
said, a good number of my clients.
So what are some of the common questions? I mean, you coach coaches, you teach coaches to be more effective with this audience. What are some of the common questions that you hear from folks? And if you're joining us today or you're watching this later, we'd love to hear, are you working with people in this space? What are your thoughts, and what are your questions as well? So go ahead and share, what are some of the common questions that you hear from coaches about working with this audience?
Right, and actually, it's not only coaches, just to be clear. So that's certainly some of the people who do the certification, right, in this specialty area. But I also work with career counselors, right, and particularly in individuals in colleges and universities, right, who may say, we're getting a lot more students who are on the spectrum and really want some ideas about how do we guide them to find a realistic and manageable job or career. And this certainly applies to coaches as well. I also have individuals working at nonprofits, right? And so it generally falls into a couple of areas. How do we help guide individuals to find something that's going to be manageable and use their abilities, right? And then once someone is hired, how do we help them get the job and then hang on to it? So a lot of it is, and I feel very strongly that people should have a good understanding, right, of what is Asperger's/autism, how does it impact adults in the workplace. So in the course, I really do take some time to go through and describe from a practical, not a clinical perspective, but what would we see in individuals that is going to impact them in the workplace, and then provide some very practical strategies on how do I assist individuals to get past whatever the barriers may be.
Yeah, and we have Ayana who's joined us, and she said that she just went through a course as well, and so it's such needed for managers. And yes, I'm career services providers, managers, all of us need more understanding around this. And then I know we've got people in our audience, of course. Oh, I don't know what the statistics are, but most of us know someone maybe once removed who is in this population or identifies in some way on the spectrum. And that's important for us to identify with, but then also to realize that, as you talked about at the very beginning, there's a wide range of abilities, of course, and everything when we're talking about this group, because it's a very diverse group in and of itself.
Absolutely. And that's a little kind of a micro trend I've seen. What you mentioned about so many people today have some sort of connection to someone on the spectrum. And I have had situations where managers, the HR person will tell me, because I have a son or daughter, or gee, there's another family member. So when this candidate came in who did not disclose, but I kind of could tell and said, probably they're on the spectrum, and automatically then adjusted the interview process to say, so I asked very specific questions about skills and abilities, or maybe allow the person to demonstrate, right, how they would perform a task. I avoided the behavioral interview questions because so many of those are really geared toward teasing out interpersonal communication, right, scenarios and all the things we know are difficult for people on the spectrum. All right, and then just being more open to say, yeah, I didn't evaluate you on your social savvy, right? And then we'll be more patient, right, with training, because I kind of understand from having that connection to someone in my personal life.
Yes.
So I think that's a positive little thing that's happening.
Yes. Now, since you mentioned it, we had someone write in our Facebook group of should their client disclose, I don't remember if it was autism spectrum specifically, or if it was some other kind of neurodiverse aspect of the person. But what maybe one tip you would give to people if their clients are wondering when and how to disclose if they're on the spectrum?
Sure. Well, I don't think there's one right or wrong answer to this. I think a lot does depend on the particular person and their situation. But generally, the way I look at it is, if an individual believes that, boy, I can get through the interview process and clearly communicate my skills, and it's really not going to be an issue, why bring up a potential question, a potential problem, right, in an interviewer's mind? And the same when I'm hired. if I believe that I can manage all the functions of the job, right, and don't need accommodation, again, why bring it up when we want to really focus on what a person can do? However, if someone is saying, gee, I think I would have a really hard time, right, at an interview, maybe I have some challenges that are, excuse me, very hard to control, would be very noticeable, right, such as having a real difficulty making eye contact, right, where someone might get the idea then, oh, this candidate isn't really that interested in the job. Well, then I might want to disclose just to let that person know, right, that when I'm listening to you, right, I may not be looking at you, but I'm listening intently to your question. And I think the same thing if someone says, boy, I know that I'm going to need a significant accommodation on day one of the job. I recommend letting the employer know beforehand after you have your written, whether it's a contract or just your written job offer, right? So it's clear that they've hired you and they can't rescind that offer because someone discloses. But it's that same idea, just to let them know so they can be prepared beforehand. Instead of saying, boy, we were all set to start the onboarding process and now someone is telling me we really need a significant modification. Right, so a lot depends. Think about the individual, right? Do they have challenges that are really noticeable? Or is it a situation where it just seems like we can just really focus on abilities here? And then at some future point, if someone has a need to disclose and request accommodation, they absolutely can do that. So there's no time limit after you're hired.
Right. Yeah, and that's the discussion is always what's the conversation with that employer at the beginning, and how do we want to put forward your story, and what's going to make sense to position you as a good hire, and not feel like we're hiding those things, but we're also not bringing them up when they're not part of the story of how you're a good employee necessarily. That's a challenging place for people to be in. So we do have a couple of questions. So someone's asking about, and this is a long one. So they have, yeah, but I think we'll start with, he's working with a candidate that's in between jobs right now, embarking on the idea of connecting with employers to pitch the candidate. Do you have people in your world that contact employees on behalf of candidates?
I see employers on half of, like, more of a job placement, I think is what they're asking.
Yeah, so
Right,
the coach is thinking about, the coach is thinking about taking that job placement role.
Okay. I mean, I certainly know of some people, right, who do offer that service. It's not something that I offer, but absolutely, yes. Some people who say it's kind of my specialty area is, being able to contact employers, and particularly the employers who indicate specifically that they are either autism friendly or diversity inclusion friendly. So absolutely, that's certainly a possibility. And it is one way I know of, and even some organizations that do it, and they place people and they're successful.
Yeah, you might see coach that's asking that question. If there's an organization in your community that might help you with that, or make some introductions for you, or perhaps be a place where your candidate could get that kind of assistance in addition to whatever you're providing. I think those are all great options. To be an advocate, to be that introducer, to sort of be the placement person for your candidate. So then we had a question about the Myers-Briggs for job interviews. I know this was on the list of assessments that companies are using still today, which always gets under my skin because it tells you that it's not supposed to be used for employment assessment.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they're not doing it. Do you still see people using that, and how does it impact the neurodiverse clients that you're working with specifically?
I can't say honestly, I have not had a case where, it was brought to my attention, or that, any client of mine ever said, gosh, when I had to take the MBTI. So I don't have direct experience of that happening. Um, I do know that for some of the companies that do the screening with the personality, more of the kind of scenarios. I'll never forget, I had one woman, and one of the questions she told me about was they asked, would you describe yourself more as a wildflower garden or an English garden? Now, I think many of us could kind of, if we're not on the spectrum, we can kind of get that abstract, right, kind of concept there, and what they were trying to tease out. But she said to me, as someone, with autism, I'm very literal minded. She said, I have absolutely no idea, right, what they meant, why they were asking it. And I do think sometimes that kind of testing, while companies are completely within their rights to do it, as long as they apply it to everyone, right, who's contacting them about particular types of jobs. I do think that sometimes you are discriminating unintentionally with some people who, again, may hear language so literally, or say, gee, if I haven't experienced a situation, I'm not sure how to really describe what I would do, that you end up missing out on some, really good candidates who could be, big contributors in the company. So I do think it's an issue for sure. And
Yeah, and
maybe that would be
employers
an
to be more
area,
aware.
of requesting accommodation with some of
Yeah,
that
I would not know
personality
what to
testing.
answer. I would not know what to answer to that question either. Like, well, tell me a little bit more about the differences that you're still drawing between those two. I would have no idea what someone was asking about in that question. That's a horrible question. But like you said, some people are going to have an easier time navigating that than other people for many different reasons. And people who are on the spectrum may have a difficult time with those more abstract questions as well. So this is a great question. So we know that sometimes people that are on the spectrum really struggle with that relationship building and networking and the whole idea of informational meetings. That can be very stressful. What have you done with your clients to help them navigate that in a way that's more comfortable?
Right. Well, actually, on the topic of networking, so for some of my clients, when we go through and really go step by step, certainly are able to do one-on-one networking, right? So probably I'm not going to feel comfortable coming into an event or even online when there are, just lots of people participating, and but if I can set something up one-on-one, right? So I can really prepare beforehand. It's going to be kind of a controlled environment. That can be a channel. Now, for others who really have a level of anxiety and say, I just don't feel comfortable even to reach out, sometimes I find that parents can be a big help. And kind of going into their network and saying, all right, I know somebody, who might they know? And sometimes I think people don't think of it because for the parents who were starting their careers in a different time when there wasn't as large an emphasis on networking, may not even think that that can be a way to open the door, right, for their son or daughter, right, and to make these connections. So you're not putting that burden on the individual. So that can be another way sometimes to make that connection, or even setting up in their companies, right? If parents saying to, maybe the HR manager, here's my son or daughter, they have these abilities, thinking about these certain types of jobs that you hire for in our organization, would they be willing, right, to speak to them and find out more about what they might be able to do, and even keeping a resume on file for future reference.
Yeah, I worked with a gentleman in his 60s at one point that was on the spectrum, and he was researching new careers. And we talked about going and talking to someone about that career And I had never thought about it this way, but he said, well, that would be me admitting that I don't know about that. And that was that he wasn't going to do that. And so we had to work on what types of questions would he ask and how would he form that basis of the conversation in a way that was comfortable for him. But then we also talked about using his existing interests as a way to just test the waters. So he was really into photography. He was going to photography meetings. He was talking to people about, the very technical aspects of the camera.
Mhm.
And he wanted to learn more about teaching photography and if that could be a career choice for him. And so we talked about how could he have those conversations, not necessarily in the big group there, because as you said, that's very stressful. But if he met people there and got talking to them about the camera, if then he'd be comfortable setting up a one-on-one, and then he and I would have an opportunity to really prepare for that one-on-one, so that he didn't feel like he had to do it at the photography meeting. That meeting, the point there was just to, see who he enjoyed talking with, and then follow up with them, make sure he got their contact information.
You're
And then
right.
he and I would do the other parts after that, so that it kind of separated the two pieces. And he was, everybody's different. So he was okay with those group photography sessions, but he couldn't imagine asking anyone there about his career.
Mhm.
And so we had to break it down and say, okay, we'll have the contact information, we'll do the follow-up, and you can have that conversation one-on-one later after we've talked about the person and the best approach and the best questions to ask and all of those things. So it was just making it step by step, I guess.
Right. Absolutely. And tying in, which is a great idea, right? If I can tie in as well the person's special interest area, because I certainly find that when it comes to the area of special interest, individuals can be quite loquacious and really have, very confident in talking about those kind of things. So I think that's great. Yeah, make some of the connections that way, right? Low pressure, something I'm interested in, then take the next step. I also have sometimes people who may say, I'm just not comfortable, with a stranger, someone I don't know. So maybe even, if I am on a LinkedIn group, right, or Facebook in a particular area, and maybe I can see, a couple of people to connect with, or who I might feel comfortable just to ask a question or put one out to the group, right, as someone, gee, I'm thinking about this field, right, and just kind of test the waters that way. Right, so I don't have that pressure of a live conversation with someone. So that can be another way in.
Yeah, I would think that social media and the ability to plan, and as a coach, right, we could sit down and do that with that person. Well, let's do it right now. Let's put that out there and see what it does, or let's send someone a message and see what happens, because those are things we could help people work through, script out, and actually do, and then help them walk through the process a little bit more hands-on than we might with some of our other clients. Although I think it's helpful for most of our clients to have some of those step-by-steps.
But yes, the whole topic of informational interviewing, I think was in my book about for people with Asperger's, how to get hired, I think was the longest chapter, because you're right. You have to really go through though and prepare step by step in a lot of detail. And I remember I had a client one time and we're working on that. And one of the questions that she was planning to ask at the informational interview was to say, I've had people telling I'm not good at small talk. How can I get better at it?
Hmm.
Right? And even though we hadn't seen, that was just kind of a little confused about the context, right, of that situation. And I said, in the coaching session, that's a great thing to ask and we can work on. But when we think about the context of an informational interview, that's really not the purpose and why you're there. And that really taught me. So I go through with my clients and we get very specific on the questions they want to ask, right, and write them down. And so it's very clear and we're not going off on those kind of tangents.
Yes, yes. Again, helpful for all of our clients, even though it might be more helpful for some clients. Yes, yeah, and someone just wrote in that the going to a meetup where there's a common interest, joining even an online group where there's that common interest, as you were saying before, Barbara, gives all that information. So tell us a little bit about the course. And I just made a short link for you here. So Barbara is a partner with Career Thought Leaders. She offers a course through her company, Forward Motion Coaching. But tell us a little bit more about the course.
Yeah, so it is. It's a Asperger/Autism employment coach certification. All right, and what it is, it's not a how to do coaching. This is really how to work specifically, all right, with individuals on the autism spectrum. And I would say some of the people who take it are coaches, as I mentioned earlier, but others are, from other counseling disciplines, or people in nonprofits. So you don't have to be a certified coach or have that as your job, all right, to do the course. And it consists of 8 weekly sessions that are live over the internet. And we kind of go through everything from understanding what is the impact, right, on adults in the workplace. I do talk about how to adjust the coaching model, and I'll say coaching/counseling, all right, for individuals who, for example, are very literal, etc. And also knowing maybe I talk a little bit about even when to refer, right? Maybe someone is not quite ready yet to be looking for a job. They may have to address other things. Then I go through my 4-step process on how to assist people to choose the right type of job or career. Then we move into how to help individuals to stay employed. Sometimes that's the big challenge, right? Is how do I hang on to the job? I do talk about disclosure and accommodations, right? Specifically for the workplace, because things really do change once you're outside an academic setting. And then I go through some of the innovative employer initiatives, right, and how these can be channels, right, for individuals to, be evaluated in the right way and really find a manageable type of job. All right, and so what I do, they're 90-minute sessions. I do record each one and make that recording available for 2 weeks, all right, after the meeting. So if something happens, someone can't make it, you're not going to miss the material. All right, and then also part of this is a 6-week supervised practicum, right, where a person is actually working with someone on the spectrum, either a job seeker or someone who is employed. All right, and then I give feedback as they're going through those coaching meetings. All right, and then in between for the sessions, there are readings. We get into case studies, so there are some written assignments, and I really have put a lot of work into showing the various types of profiles, right, that a person could be noticing, and then a lot of reference and resource materials. So I certainly have had people who say, I have a good amount of experience working with people on the spectrum, and finish the course and say, boy, I sure learned a lot, even though I've already had some experience.
Yeah. Well, that's great. It is very in depth. We've had a few of our Career Thought Leaders individuals go through it. And so I've heard from them that the program was very impactful in their work. I know Lois Freak, she's in Australia, but she took your program
Right.
a year or so ago. And so just an opportunity for people, if they're working with folks on the spectrum or they're thinking about it or just planning for the future, that there may be more individuals that are looking for this type of assistance. I think it's a great tool set to add to our work that we do. And thank you so much for offering this opportunity for individuals to go through this program. So I know if you have any other questions about the program, please don't hesitate to comment, and Barbara and I will come back and monitor those comments.
Oh, absolutely.
And like I said, I created this little short link for her. It goes straight to her website and to the registration. So thank you so much, Barbara. This is great. And we come back every Tuesday talking about the new and the next in careers. Next Tuesday, I'll talk a little bit about social media because I'm going to be at Social Media Marketing World. And then we've only got a few weeks left until our symposium in San Diego. I've had people reaching out saying that they're still interested and thinking about going. I checked flight prices today, and it was actually $200 cheaper today to buy a ticket than it was weeks ago when I purchased my ticket. Like a bummer, because airlines don't do that, but it means that if you're still on the fence about coming, it may not be any more expensive to come today than it would have been a few weeks ago. So Barbara, thank you again so much for joining us. And I'll just check our chat here one more time. Yay. All right. And then Lynn Miner Rosen, I bet you know her. She's saying that she took your course a while ago too. So thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you, Barbara. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, her class starts next Thursday. So if you're interested in that,
That's correct.
yes, go and get signed up for that one. Starts next Thursday. Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.